All right, guys, today we have an interesting topic to talk about. We're going to talk about how to build a wholesaling business, and we're not talking about being a solopreneur. We're talking about how to scale, and we got someone on here who's an expert who's done so. This is going to be an interesting podcast, guys, because in order for you to get out of that solopreneur stage of your life where you're doing everything on your own, you're going to have some help. You're going to have to understand leverage. You're going to have to bring people in, and there's a way that you do this, a systematic process, and we're going to talk about that today. Let me introduce you to my guest, real estate expert, Marco Romero. How you doing, Marco?
Doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks,
man.
Connor.
Yeah, man. Go ahead and let people know where you're from and kind of your company name, and give us a little background on kind of how you got in the business, and we'll dig in and talk about how you scaled a real big business really quickly and how you kind of brought people aboard to help you do that.
Well, I'm actually based in San Antonio, so the home of the Alamo. Plenty of margaritas here in the Riverwalk, and yeah, I've been here the longest. My parents were military family, so I moved all over, but they settled here, and so I've rooted here myself. And just to kind of give a little bit of history before we built our company, our wholesaling company, which is Hilco Homes, I really wanted to get into real estate investing after I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a
Right.
common story.
Right.
And so I read that book, went down my path. I went to a bunch of seminars. Eventually, I joined Lifestyles Unlimited, which is an education and mentor group
Right.
here throughout San Antonio, but they're in multiple states now. And I joined up as a member there. And I was so active and really, actually, honestly, pretty annoying to them by sending them properties all the time. When I joined, I was like right around 22, so I was like had nothing else to do. I quit my job to go into real estate because I wanted to make this happen. So eventually, they asked me to become a real estate agent to service their agents because I was always around, and I thought that would be the perfect fit, a way for me to,
Right.
do deals and make some money, that type of thing. From there, I eventually went off on my own and started wholesaling. And I wholesaled independently, and making that transition from agent to wholesaler was a bit of a jump. There's a little bit different documentation, different mindset, different approach in how you go after it. But I really saw a large opportunity there because, quite frankly, from a wholesale standpoint, you can really control your pay a lot more
Right.
when compared to doing agent work. Well, I did that for about a year or so, year and a half, and I sold so many properties to a local investment firm here in Central Texas that they asked me to join their team. Now, this was an interesting decision for me at the time because I was already independent, and this was an opportunity to then go back and work for somebody else. But I took the position, and I basically ran their acquisition team. We eventually had up to 9 guys. We closed over 125 deals in 1 year,
Wow.
and we had a pretty good volume.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. And during this time frame, I met my future wife, or current wife.
Awesome. Worked out for you.
Yeah,
It's a good
exactly.
decision.
Yeah. And so she saw me at the tail end of me wholesaling independently, which she didn't quite understand. She thought I was a drug dealer of sorts. I was texting people and closing deals kind of thing. But once I joined that company, I was running that team, and she had already had her own position at where she was working her job, and which had nothing to do with real estate. She was completely foreign to it. But I worked at that company for about a year and a half, and towards the end of that year and a half time frame, we had already planned for my wife to quit her job, and our plan was for me to support both of us from the income I was generating from running that department.
Right.
We got married in September of that year, and when we went on our honeymoon, a little bit before that, we found out that we were pregnant with our first child. So we just got married. She was quitting her job. She did her last hurrah, and that way it lined up with the honeymoon so she could really enjoy it. We found out that we were pregnant, and while I was on the honeymoon, I reflected back. During those time frames, you're on the beach, you're doing a lot of reflection. I reflected about, what I wanted our life to look like as a family, now married, but also with the child on the way.
Right.
And I knew that I was getting off track a little bit. I wasn't building my own company, controlling my own time, controlling my own income in a sense. And so after that, I decided to quit. I ended up quitting in November. Hillary, my wife, and I took kind of December for the holidays. And then we decided we were going to jump in full time in investing, which was two items: acquiring properties for cash flow, but secondarily, you can't live off $200 a month on a rental house, or
Right.
$300 or $400. So we needed some active income, and so I was going to pick up the reins of where I had been wholesaling before, and use that as our active income to live on. And then from there, we kind of started from ground zero and then built up to now our team now.
And I mean, it sounds like you've been through it and you've kind of figured out the business, gone through, a lot of people do that. There's a lot of big companies out there, and sometimes it's good to go in there, but really, we get in this business for freedom, right? And also, like you pointed out, wholesaling versus being an agent, controlling your income, on a $100,000 house, you could maybe only make a $3,000 commission as an agent, but you could wholesale that house for 20 grand as an investor. So it's important to understand that wholesaling is very powerful if you understand the business. So you started wholesaling a bunch of houses and, did very well in the business, but then you realize you got to scale, right? Because you get to that point where you can only do so much in a day, and you realize now there's a time limitation, but you bring in money in. So in the beginning, you have no money, most people, when they start the business, so they can't hire anybody. But as you make money, you need more time, and so you're kind of trading time versus money. So you started thinking you need to build a business. How did it go after your wife you brought in? Who was your first person you brought into the business? And let's kind of step through this incrementally, kind of how you built this company you have now, because y'all are doing amazing things down there.
Right. So by working at that company, I learned a lot in the sense of how a small company runs. Also, with the size of the team that I was running from an acquisition standpoint, just being mindful of hiring, who to look for, the culture that you want to build, the standard of excellence of sorts that you want to maintain within the group itself. So there was a lot of learning lessons in that regard. Also watching the CEO and the other department heads and how they handled it and what worked there and didn't work there. So there was a lot of knowledge gaining by being part of that company. But when Hillary and I, both quit our jobs and went into this head first, I didn't have a pipeline. I didn't have any sort of deals that I could go to. All my deals that I've been working were a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I had to start from scratch. So we just, went straight at it, really just doubled down on action, looked at areas where we only had to leverage half of the equation. So working with other wholesalers, reaching out to a lot of my contacts where they might already have a contract. So I only had to focus on finding the buyer. Or our first wholesale deal, once we got back into it, was from MLS. So we found an MLS deal and worked it. But the way we were able to scale, it started by actually one of the hires that I had hired at that previous company. They eventually had let him go, and his name is Juan. And so he, they let him go after like 2 or 3 months trying to do it on his own, because he wanted to stay in real estate despite it not working out with that company. He tried to do it on his own, but he was having struggles just because he only knew real estate through the lens of how that company purchased properties, which is very narrow compared to the world of real estate, especially, if you're trying to wholesale. So he reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you still in real estate? What are you doing? I want to be doing this." And so a partnership started. And what that basically looked like was it was a 50-50 split. He did all the work. He found the properties, he negotiated, he contracted. Same on the buyer side. He found the buyers, contracted, and worked the title to close it. And what I provided was the support, the guidance, access to the buyers list that I had and I was continuing to develop, and all the peripheral items. So what that did was it generated another income source for me that didn't really require much time on my part. And then that freed up my time to be able to get my own deals, but also look for our cash flow properties that we were trying to acquire as well. And so from there, it just incrementally grew.
Right. So who, obviously you got to have someone going out there in the field. So most people don't understand. Let's talk about how your acquisition guys are. They're on commission, or you pay them in salary and commission, because a lot of people don't attempt to go out there and scale their business because they don't think that they can afford to bring in an employee. when in reality, we have virtual assistants, we have commission-based employees, we have potentially interns that can come work with us in exchange for the knowledge and value we trade to them for their time. How does it kind of look in your office? Like, so most people are, how are they compensated?
So in our current position, we have 7 people on our team. We're hiring an 8th person that's going to be starting next week, and we have a virtual assistant that kind of runs for the whole team. We're probably going to be looking at hiring a new virtual assistant next month because we're right at the threshold of a full workload for her. So that's kind of where we stand.
Right.
What the different positions look like are this. Number one, we have what we call a marketing systems director. And basically, it's the title for him where he focuses on CRM, he focuses on systems, he focuses on marketing, he focuses on VA management. So all the items that aren't necessarily tied to a deal, but are very important, they're like the secondary important items, he focuses on that, which helps us to function at a more optimal rate.
Right.
My wife is Hillary. She is a closing coordinator. So she focuses on complete title work. So she's the one that signs all the documentation, is the final review of all of our documentation. She opens title, gets the assignment contracts as far as the documentation to title, and prepares for closing. If there's any title issues that come up as far as remedies that we need to work on, she'll communicate that to our team. We have a virtual assistant who's out of the Philippines who basically updates all of our tasks in the CRM, does our email blasts for us, those type of things. So the rest of the people are what we call acquisition partners.
Right.
Now, all the positions I just described are the people that handle all the actions that aren't necessarily tied to negotiating with sellers and negotiating with buyers. Our acquisition partners, we really, it didn't start this way, it's a progression, but we are constantly trying to take responsibilities away from them so that they can focus on the items that are bringing in the income for them. Those acquisition partners focus on both sides, which is the seller side and the buyer side, so they do sell their own contracts. And what I've learned through this process is it's constantly you go from one phase to the next phase. We're transitioning from phase to phase. So right now, one of our next phases that we'll be transitioning to is segregating our acquisition partners to an acquisition team and a sales team. At this point, we haven't done that. But your original question, I went on a long tangent. The way we have it broken down in pay, Hillary, my wife, doesn't get paid anything, even though she asks for that all the time. You know, as the owner, that's how we do it. But we have a small percentage that goes to the marketing system director to handle all the systems and handle all those components. And this is after we've paid all outside people. So other wholesalers, if there's fees associated, other agents or things of that degree. Like I said, a small percentage goes to the systems director, and then the remainder amount we split 50-50 with our acquisition partners. So 50 will go to them in their pocket, 50%, and then 50% will go to our company, Hilco Homes. And then we pay for all the override, like virtual assistant, office space, and everything else.
So they, do you have like a sliding scale? I know a lot of people compensate their acquisition team. Say I was better at acquiring properties than you, and I could get that house for 50 when you were going to get it for 70, but we could still buy it at 80. So I created a bigger profit because my negotiation skills or however I went in and got the contract. Do they get paid more per the profit in the deal, or is it just strictly, like you just said, a profit split, or are they bonus in a way to earn a bonus or anything like that y'all have different?
No, the pay structure I already have in place is pretty lucrative compared to most places,
right.
Especially the bigger companies. The bigger companies, they're trying to move towards a salary with percentage bonus model, which makes sense for bringing in more revenue to the company itself, which you can grow. But for me, from my history, I was an agent, I was a wholesaler, I worked for other companies, I went back and forth, so I've had a lot of perspectives of when I felt like I wasn't getting paid a lot, or I felt like I should be getting more, or the thought process of maybe this other opportunity would make more sense for me because of pay. So I've tried to make it very lucrative for our team because, quite honestly, I don't want our acquisition partners to stay wholesalers. I want them to be able to become investors.
Right.
And wholesaling itself is just a job. But if I can help them achieve their goals and put more money in the bank so they can acquire properties and build their own passive income, the loyalty that we'll have with each other will go much beyond this deal, the 6 months, a year. It's something that'll go into 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And, if I can make them wealthy, who knows, we might be partnering on apartment complexes down the road.
Right,
So
right.
that's always been our mentality. We want our people to succeed, even at the detriment of our own profit at the end.
I mean, I like that thought process. I like kind of where you're coming from at that. So as far as virtual assistants, the way our business runs is primarily all run by virtual assistants. If you need help with getting a virtual assistant, I can do that for you. And same thing, guys, if you're out there listening, you need help with a virtual assistant, just give me a call. But how do you have your back office management set up? Are you using Podio? Like how does the team communicate with each other, or does the team really communicate interconnected, or do they basically just work with you and your wife one-on-one, or is the team actually working together cohesively with some type of synergy?
Right. Okay. So there's three fundamental components that you really want to get on as soon as possible. First, Slack is a free communication platform. It's basically like group texting on steroids.
Right.
You can highly segregate different topics and channels based on what you want to talk about. So all of our team members are in Slack. This is advantageous, especially for a virtual assistant, because they can talk to her and she can talk to them, and communication is key. As far as our organization and our CRM, we do use Podio. I've used a number of other CRMs, and as of right now, Podio seems to work the best. Also, like I said, we have a gentleman, his name is Ed, who was the marketing systems director I mentioned earlier. He's quite proficient in Podio as well. So leveraging his expertise, we're in a platform that he knows the best. And so he has custom built it for us, and whenever we need something, he goes and tweaks it and has really, really built that to maximize our effectiveness. And then the last item, which was something that I was a little bit slower on to get, was getting an office space. Now, we don't have an actual office that we are leasing. Instead, in San Antonio specifically, we have the privilege of taking advantage of a place called Geekdom. And Geekdom is a shared office space in downtown San Antonio, where honestly we pay $50 a month per person. So our office cost is $400, give or take, every single month, which is extremely affordable when you are looking at office rent in general.
Right.
But that's really critical because my wife and I, like I said, we have a daughter now, so we don't have very much flexibility. We have to work from home a lot just because of childcare, and she's growing. She's 1.5 years now. So we have only 2 days that we can go to the office. So those are like our most productive days, and we're around the team. But when we're not there, it doesn't mean that they can't be there, and they are there every single day. So them being close to one another and supporting one another is fundamental, because I can't be there all the time, and I can only do so much over the phone.
Right. It's getting more popular, those shared office spaces. I believe there's one called like Regis up here in my area, and a few others. Because I mean, the beginning of a business, or really at any time in the business, capital is very big in what we do here. So to not have wasted costs and have leaks paying way too much for an unneeded office, but still have the benefits of doing so. Plus, you may come into other contacts and build networking relationships with other people at that office. So it's just beneficial altogether. I guess let's walk through. Let's take a kind of like an overall 30,000 square foot view down. Say I just contact you. I'm a motivated seller. I want to sell you my house. Let's talk about how that lead goes through your office and to what's first, the next, who it goes to, and then kind of how it gets kicked out the back end. Because obviously, I don't know if you're having your virtual assistant run your comps on it and get a value on it. You're probably having someone else do that, but then they're creating the flyer and doing the marketing, the distribution side, right?
So with the leads, it depends on how it comes in, but most of our paid marketing leads go to Pat Live, which is a live answering service.
Right.
You can have your virtual assistant do that. I haven't had a virtual assistant that doesn't have some tinge of an accent, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but with a lot of these sellers, you're trying to keep that good communication until you can build rapport with them. And sometimes, for whatever reason, that might be a turnoff. So we have Pat Live answer our phone calls, and then once that we have some pretty basic questions that they answer right there over the phone. They send out an email. From there, it gets sent out to our team. Now, only specific people can work these paid leads. It's people that have gone through our training process. Our training process is 6 deals closed, and once they've graduated, in a sense, then they can work these. We feel confident that they will handle each situation well. But one of the mistakes I made when I was the acquisition manager of that company was I would round robin the leads. And a lot of people do that. It naturally makes sense because there's a fairness around that, and you're being fair to your team, and you're trying to do the right thing amongst the team members. But the right perspective is not necessarily being fair to the team. The right perspective is what is best for that lead, especially if it's a paid lead. What is the best way to handle that lead? So we have first come, first serve in our scenario. So when that email goes out from Pat Live, then whoever grabs it first is the first one to work it. Now, we do have it set up to where if a person has grabbed three properties in a row, well, then they can't get the next one, kind of thing.
Right.
But we want to incentivize our people to be active and available. And as you know, in this business, when a lead comes in, diminishing returns happen really quick. So you need to catch them while they're hot. Right. So we're keeping our incentives in aligned with what the correct way to handle and work a particular lead.
Right. So, I mean, it's a pretty vague question. I mean, like, obviously, it's important to build a business. Is there anything specifically that you think is incredibly important we haven't gone over that you would want to give out as advice to someone who's at that point where they're kind of maybe getting to like 1 or 2 deals a month where they're not able to be successful at the business, but they want to take it to the next level. They know they can do it, but they're just kind of, how do I make that jump?
Okay. Well, you want to think of leverage. When you're trying to transition from 1 to 2 deals to more, you got to think of leverage. Is it time that you're trying to leverage? Is it money that you're trying to leverage? By me, as the example earlier, I brought in that other person. That was a great form of leverage. I built it in a manner that I didn't want to do. I didn't do any of the items that I didn't want to do, but I was still helping him, and he was helping me win-win. I've even had investors, like if I didn't have enough money starting out for paid leads, I would have investors give me that money to do the marketing for them. And then the trade-off would be, hey, we'll do a percentage split of the proceeds. I'll do all the work. You're paying for the marketing, and you get, first rights at those deals, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's another way of leverage. But one of the biggest things that has been a learning lesson for us, and we're always working to improve it, is the hiring process in general. That's where we've improved in that arena, has helped us grow in the right way. Now we are 7 people right now. Like I said, we have an 8th person coming soon. But there was a lot of people that we tried to hire on that we thought was going to be a good fit that did not end up working out. And
right.
The mentality that we have is kind of now is hire slow and fire fast. You want to make it almost really difficult for someone to join our team. We have a very multi-step process in our hiring process to where we filter out a lot of people. In fact, we want most people to be filtered out.
Right.
So that at the end of the day, we're left with not good people, but great people. Because once they get into our system, all that time with training and effort, and even once you start giving them leads and such, you don't want to be wasting your time, your money, and your effort on the wrong people.
I mean, it's extremely important to understand what you just said there. It's very, very valuable. The same thing with the contractors. People get into a situation where they know they need to hire someone on to their office, or they have a house that they just closed on that they need to, get someone out there and start working on it. So they just rush around because they know the clock's ticking, and so they just put someone in the position without fully vetting them, and then it just costs them so much more in the long run, right? So this is a business where the front end cost is not, or the front end result is not as important as the back end result. for example, people, what would it be like? Maybe paint. People buy like the cheap paint, right? It's like almost basically like water with a few drops of paint in it. But they're seeing that they're going to save a few $100s on the cost of the paint, but they don't realize they're going to pay $1,000, $2,000 more to have the house painted multiple times in labor costs. So there's all sorts of examples like that in this business. And so if you just hire someone in your office, you spend 6 months, they're going to flake out, they're going to do, poor job handling it. So like, what about this? Like, you said you like to keep some of these houses. This has been an issue I know with some fellow friends of mine that have other companies like yours. Where how do you decide if your partners X amount of leads come into the office? They're all not the same. It's not like a pizza where they're basically cut the same slice. One could be a huge deal, one could be a lesser deal, one could be in an area that you like versus where they like. How do you divvy out who keeps these rentals and which ones you wholesale and what you keep for active or transactional income versus long-term passive residual income?
So it was fundamental for me to make it possible for everybody that ever joins our company to be able to purchase our properties. That was fundamental.
Right.
The whole reason that we were doing wholesaling was so that we could further our ability to acquire passive income. And I'm not trying to bring more people on our team just to wholesale, like I mentioned earlier. I'm bringing people on our team that we can help them achieve their goals and help them become financially secure as well, and build a life that's advantageous for all of us. Now, we have an internal purchase system or like a procedure. Anybody can purchase any property based on when you were hired, puts you in a particular order in like a purchasing order. If you purchase a property, then you automatically go to the bottom. If a property comes up, then it goes to, if anybody is interested in the property, they have to make sure first off that the people above them on that list, wherever they are, aren't going to go after the property. Right. If they do want to purchase a property, then they let whoever's working that deal, the acquisition partner, know that they want to purchase a property. And that acquisition partner can refuse to sell it to them and wholesale it out, but they have to find a buyer within a week. Because in fairness to the acquisition partner, they might be able to wholesale that property for 20 grand or 30 grand, and they want to be able to capture that. Because the way we have it set up is if someone purchases a property internally, then they only pay a flat fee of 5 grand. That would do our normal splits that I mentioned earlier. So in essence, they could really get a steal of a deal. But if that wholesaler that's got the initial property that's working it thinks he can wholesale it for 12 grand or 15 grand or whatever, then they still have that week time frame to move it.
Right.
And a week is an appropriate amount of time to, if it's the right deal, it's going to move.
Yeah, it should move in a day. I mean, I really like how you have everything set up. I think that you're coming from the right position, understanding the social dynamics. I like how you're supporting your team and their growth as an individual investor as well, because not a lot of companies do that. They're in it for that top-down money, and so you built an impressive company. I'm not just saying that. So why don't you go ahead and let everybody know how they can reach out to you? Who knows? You may have someone listening to this in your area that wants to come. It could be an addition to your team. But go ahead and give out your contact information. Give out whatever you want, email, website address, or whatever you feel comfortable with.
Well, I appreciate it. Honestly, Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/Hilco Homes, or you go to the search bar, you type in Hilco Homes, we have a green circle logo, and you can find us there. And honestly, we've tried to hire in a lot of places, and Facebook has been our best place for hiring. But on our Facebook page, we put out a ton of content. Pretty much every single day, we are putting out free content, more for people that are new to wholesaling, trying to get into wholesaling, or even those people that are more intermediate, but they're always looking to improve. We cover that. And in fact, every Friday we have a show that we call Ask Wholesale, where we take questions from our community and answer those questions on the show, so that we're giving real value to the people with their specific situations and going over that. Right. But you can reach out to us on Hilco, message us, comment, all those things.
Yeah, guys, run over there and like that page. Do you have anything like a YouTube channel or anything else you want to send people to?
It's the same thing. If you do a search on YouTube for Hilco Homes, you'll see us there. And a lot of that content's the same on Facebook. We like Facebook better because we're more active in Facebook and the engagement's a little easier. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
you can find us on YouTube as well.
You want to go ahead and spell your company name out? Was it Hilco, just so they can
Yeah,
kind of? Okay.
perfect. So Hillary and Marco. So we meshed both the names together and got Hilco, Hilco Homes, plus the alliteration. Can't go wrong with that. So that's how it came to be.
All right, buddy. I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to come on here. Hopefully someone will reach out to you. And guys, also, if you have deals in his area down there in San Antonio, reach out to him. He could probably help you sell them. If you're a new investor, there's nothing better to help jumpstart your business than to align with someone on his level, right? So I'm sure there's a way for you to bring deals to him or to work with them. So guys, appreciate you listening to the show today, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Marco. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.